Welcome back to Boss Uncaged podcast. So today we have, and it's funny because I'm looking at this man, and I'm looking at his history, and I'm looking at everything he has done until this point. And the funny thing is, to me, is like obviously I'm going to give him a nickname, and I'm gonna get that out the way. So his nickname is going to be the Selling Boss, but in reality, he is the Beast of the Month and the Savage of every damn quarter. So Jeremy, I want you to kind of tell the audience a little bit about you and what are we going to be talking about today.
Well, I'm not that cool, but thanks for the compliment. My kids always say I'm pretty boring, so I appreciate the savage of the quarter. I love that. I haven't heard that one before. I'm the chairman and founder of an organization called Seventh Level. We're a sales training company that trains anywhere from Fortune 100 companies all the way to SMB down to individual salespeople that sell anything, basically how to sell more of their products and services in a way that actually gets our prospects to pull them in rather than them having to push for it. It's a lot easier to sell when you learn how to work with human behavior rather than working against it, for sure. So that's kind of an overview of what we do over here at Seventh Level.
Well, I think you came on very humble, but let's just get the elephant out of the room, right? I mean, back in the day when you were coming and becoming a salesperson, were
Yeah.
you not known for essentially selling on average, bringing home 2.5 million on a regular basis? Wasn't that your thing?
Yeah. Well, blah 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 blah. Okay, yeah. So according to like some companies that rate salespeople, I was ranked. I think it was don't quote me. It was either 44 or number 45 in the world
Mm-hmm.
out of any salesperson selling anything. So we're talking about 160 some industries as one of the top 50 income earners in any industry for about 8 years straight
Wow.
before I actually retired. And yeah, I had some, I was making close to $3 million a year and in commissions in four different industries, two B2C and two B2B. Did exceptionally well, and then retired in what was it, 2016? Retired. Didn't know what I was going to do. Hung out for about a year. Started seeing a bunch of ads on like IG and Facebook from all the sales gurus, saying you should do this and you should do that. And I looked at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, all these salespeople taking that advice. If I would have sold that way, my income would have been like 95% less. Like, I kid you not. I was like, that is the worst sales advice I've ever heard of. And this guy or gal supposedly has this huge training company teaching all these companies how to sell. No wonder people suck at selling. So it almost forced me where I was just like, well, I got to do something now. Like, I can't just like have all these people like desperate, not knowing what to do. I don't like hearing and seeing salespeople get slapped in the face, when they get on calls. So I jumped into the game. I spent the next like 6 to 7 months in my man cave, writing out the first version of what now is called NEPQ 3.0. So I read out the first version, got all that recorded, and just kind of jumped into the game about 4 years ago, and here we are.
Hmm. So, I mean, let's time travel back, right? I mean, obviously, I want you to kind of talk about when you were growing up on the farm, kind of like what that lifestyle was like. Now, obviously, growing up on the farm to becoming such a successful salesperson that you are today, like
Yeah.
that's a flip of a coin. It's completely different areas of expertise. So let's talk about that.
Well, my parents, I love them, but nobody in the town that I grew up in, Missouri, 800 some people, if that, nobody taught. They weren't teaching us in high school how to communicate or persuade, right? Like, you're not born, with advanced questioning techniques. No one's born with advanced tonality. Like, nobody's born with advanced objection prevention techniques. Those are acquired skills. So obviously, growing up on a cattle ranch in the middle of Missouri, I wasn't taught any of those skills.
Hmm.
So I got into college. All right. So I got into college. I was about this, I think my junior year of school. And I was like, hey, I need to, I guess, make some money. I don't know what I'm going to do here. I've got this degree. So I was going to school in behavioral science and human psychology, but I was like, I need to make some money. Okay. Because I got married like really, really early to my first wife and had a daughter on the way when I was like 21, almost about 22 at that age. So I was like, I got to work, I have to provide, like, I've got to do something. So I got my first job selling home security systems door to door. So straight commission job. So as you know, if you don't make a sale, you don't get paid anything. So it's one of those type of companies that hires anybody because they're just desperate to hire people, like put bodies on the doors, right? So they basically drive you out they drive about 10 of you out into like different neighborhoods. And, you have a script there that you study a week or two before, and they give you a couple books by, what I call the old sales gurus. And they're basically like, hey, go make some sales. Like, we'll see you after dark. And it's going to be easy. You're going to make all this money. And I still remember knocking on the first door. And I still remember what my sales manager said as I left the van. He said, don't forget, show them how excited you guys are about the product. We're selling alarm systems. Show them how excited you are about the alarm system, and people are just going to be contagious, and they're going to want to let you in their home and present to them. And I was like, okay, that makes complete sense. So I was really excited. I started talking about the features and the benefits and how we had the best this and we had the best this. And I started noticing from the very first door, I can't believe it, but I was getting all these objections. Jeremy, we don't need it. Jeremy, we can't afford it. Your price is too high. Oh, we already talked to one of you guys a few months ago. I need to keep looking around for other quotes. I don't make rash decisions. I need to think it over. I need to talk with my spouse. Can you call me back a week, a month, a year later, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I remember one Friday evening. So this is like late June, in the Midwest, it's freaking hot, so sweat rolling down my chest, my back. I just walked 12 hours that day. So my legs just, if you've ever done door to door, your legs are like jello at the end of the day. And I made 0 sales that day. I worked 12 hours and made not $1 for that entire week. I had made 0 sales again. So I made no dollars. Okay. Mm-hmm. So this is probably about 8 weeks into this job. And I remember sitting there on the curve, waiting to get picked up. And I was thinking like, maybe selling just wasn't for me. You with me? Right. Yeah. I kind of felt like broken as a man. And I remember the sales manager picked us up, and he popped in a Tony Robbins CD. People listen to CDs back, the things called CDs 20 years ago. And Tony said something like this. I could be butchering this, but he said, most people fail for the simple reason they don't learn the right skills necessary to succeed. He goes on to say everybody's taught skills, but he says people who fail are the ones who were not taught the right ones. So that something he said there just clicked. It was like, divine intervention from the heavens itself, that maybe what the company was training us and what I was learning from, what I called, like I said, the old sales gurus now, maybe they just weren't the right skills. Okay. Maybe they were outdated. Maybe they just didn't work very well anymore. So at the same time, I was, like I said, I was in college studying behavioral science and human psychology, and my professors were saying that and really, if you think about it, behavioral science is really just the study of the brain. It's why human beings make decisions to do one thing or another. That's, kind of in non-scientific terms, that's really what behavioral science is, okay? Human psychology. So my professors were saying, hey, the most persuasive way to communicate is over here. Mm-hmm. But the gurus, they were saying it was over here. It was like complete opposite. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, whoa, I'm so confused. What am I supposed to do? So I was like, how do I take the theory of behavioral science and the way the brain works and decision-making, and how do I wrap that into my sales process? Mm-hmm. So that's what I started doing all of the time. Like every waking minute I had, that's what I was trying to figure out. Okay. So I started learning how to use techniques that work with human behavior, that triggered my prospects to pull me in. Okay. Rather than me trying to push. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then at that point, pretty quickly, actually, selling became very, very easy and extremely profitable. So that's kind of how I got into the game a long time ago, man.
Yeah, so I mean, even you're talking about profitable, but I mean, while you were in college, I mean, you were pretty much grossing somewhere like around 100,000, which for any college student, it'll be mind blowing for someone to bring in that revenue.
Yeah, I think my first summer I made like 100, because this is summer program, so you'd work like 4 months in the summer, okay, when you weren't in college, and then their whole thing was like, hey, make enough money in the summer, and when you go to school, you don't have to work at all. So I was like sold. I was like, wow, that's really a good idea. So that first summer, I think I made like 170, 180 grand in 4 months after I figured it out. Then the next summer I made like 350, 400. You're making 400 grand in 4 months because that's all commissions. There's not like any overhead or anything. You're just an employee. You're like freaking, Jeff Bezos or Donald Trump. You feel like you're the richest guy in Babylon or something, and you just blow it all. That's a whole nother story.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely very cool. I mean, based upon what you're saying and the psychology behind someone, I think you had made a statement on Instagram about stop being so salesy and start memorizing your lines. So I want you to kind of talk about that. Like, how does that play into where people are with sales right now?
Well, I think the sad part is that most salespeople, I'm just being realistic, because a lot of companies, fairly large, even Fortune 500 companies will bring us in to audit some of their sales departments. And when we listen to calls, this is shocking. You're talking about Fortune 500 companies that make billions of dollars a year in sales. And their salespeople are just, for the most part, winging it. They're really more product pushers. They just talk about the product and the benefits and features, and they just go through the numbers. They have to talk to 100 people to make 2 sales. And I'm just like, why wouldn't you just talk to 4 people to make 2 sales? It seemed like it's more profitable to me. But most salespeople sound, as you know, like scripted robots. If you get a phone call from a salesperson, or even if you get on Zoom, or sometimes even if you're in a boardroom, it doesn't even really matter what you sell. You can tell that they're almost like reading off a script. Okay, especially if you're getting a phone call for you're on Zoom and you're not in, face to face with them. And because of that, it triggers what's called fight or flight mode in most human brains, because we know what they're doing. It's like a telemarketer. When a telemarketer calls, it sounds 100% scripted, like they're literally like reading off the script, and you automatically go into fight or flight mode where you try to get rid of them very quickly, right? It's just the way our brains are wired as human beings. So unfortunately, most salespeople, they don't take the time to really memorize, not just memorize, but actually understand the psychology behind why they're even asking certain questions in the first place. They're just like, oh, here's a question, I need to ask it. They don't understand what they're trying to find out from that. They don't understand how to trigger with the right tonality to get that prospect to even want to answer the question. So I always attribute it to like Hollywood, let me ask you, who's your favorite actor, actress? I'm going to ask you a question.
Um, Damn.
Who's your favorite, man?
I would say Robert De Niro is definitely up there to just go.
Yeah, he's a stud. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So him, I love George Clooney movies. So if you watch their movies, pretty much everything they say is 100% scripted, right? But does it sound scripted when you're watching it?
I don't know.
Not at all. It sounds completely normal, natural, because you don't look at a De Niro movie and think, oh, that's Robert De Niro. You view him as the character he's playing in that movie, right?
Yeah.
That's how you view them. And it's because they memorize their lines. They memorize the tonality and the verbal pausing. So it makes it sound natural. It makes it sound real. And that triggers you to engage. Now, if they just were like sitting here reading from a script, you'd be like, well, they wouldn't get the part, right? That's why they're famous, because they memorize their lines. So as a sales professional, if you're a business owner and you've got salespeople, if they're not memorizing everything that they're supposed to say and ask, and they don't learn the right tonality and where to pause and those type of things, you're just, as a company, you're just losing sales that you could be making if they learn those skills. It's like, some of the, I don't really get into politics. I'm kind of in the middle and all this kind of mumbo jumbo and stuff between the two parties, but I like to watch politicians and presidents like talk, because I like to see how they communicate. And one great communicator was President Obama when he was the president. And you would notice when he would talk, he was really good at verbal pausing. He would say something, and then he would just go silent for 3 to 5 seconds, and it triggers engagement, because everybody's like, what is, what's going on? Whereas some President Biden now, he's not a very good communicator, right? He just kind of talks all over the place, and you're just lost. You're like, what's going on? Like, you're confused. But President Obama, amazing speaker, okay, because of his verbal pausing, and it sounded natural. Even though he might have been reading it off a teleprompter, you could tell he was far more prepared. He kind of had it halfway memorized, even though he was going back and forth, and his tonality was really spot on. And that's why people were so much into following him compared to the current guy we have. So that's just kind of a difference there.
So I mean, I think you brought up psychology, and I mean that's like your bedrock to why you're so successful right now. And with another video that you had on Instagram that was pretty cool as well too. And you were saying that okay, don't apologize when you're late. You want to remain equally yoked, equally eye on the same level as the person. And instead of
Yeah.
saying that, you want to say, thanks for your patience. So I want you to kind of talk about that for a little bit because I think some
Yeah.
salespeople they think it's okay to apologize and then move on. But what you're saying makes perfect sense when you're explaining it.
You want to, okay, that's a very good point. So that's a kind of a reel that I did the other day. So you want to come in any sales conversation you're in, you want to come in with an equal, what we call status frame. Okay. So when you come into that conversation, the words you're using and what you're asking, you have to trigger the prospect to, in the beginning, to at least view you as an equal status.
Hmm.
If you come in mumbling and jumbling like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm late, like, please forgive me and all this stuff, all it does in the prospect's mind is lower your status because they view you like they view all these other salespeople that say similar things.
Hmm.
So if you come in overly assumptive, if you come in needy, right, you need the sale. If you come in attached, all that does is it lowers your status frame, and the prospect's mind, subconsciously, we cannot help it as a human being, is picking up on social cues from you. So they're picking up on your verbal and nonverbal cues based on what you're saying and or asking that is lowering your status in their mind. And when you start to lower your status in their mind, they don't view you as an expert. They don't view you as like a trusted authority who's going to get them the results they want. So they just kind of push you off to the side, like all these other salespeople that call them every day, and they commoditize you. And that's not a place where you want to be. So when you come in, you have to have that equal status. Okay. And as the conversation goes and your questioning ability starts to build more of a gap in their mind from where they are compared to where they want to be, you're helping them find problems they didn't think they had, not by telling them. That goes in one ear out the other. You're biased, you're the salesperson, but your questions allow them to tell them that themselves.
Yeah.
So as you're doing that, what you're doing is you're building a massive status in their mind where by the end of that conversation, whether it's a one call close, or let's say if you're in a B2B complex sound environment, it's a next step demo or next step proposal, whatever you have in your process, they're starting to view you as the expert, as a higher status than them in what you're talking about. And that's where you want your prospects to view you as having a high status, because then they view you as an authority figure. Whereas they don't view all these other salespeople like that. They just view them as trying to sell them something. They're trying to get rid of them. So just a common thing like that, instead of saying like, oh, I apologize, just say, John, I appreciate your patience. I'm just a little bit behind schedule for my last appointment. I appreciate your patience. I'm just a little bit behind schedule. Now that implies that you're what? That you're busy. You got lots of other clients. You don't need them to buy. And that raises your status. So that's what I mean by a status frame.
Well, I think earlier on you were being modest, and obviously you're living up to being the savage of the quarter in this moment right now, just by what you're telling our particular audience, right? So, with that, just lead into like this next topic.
Oh, can I give you one more example
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
status frame? So this is kind of it just came into my mind. So when was it? About 6 years ago, so I was living in St. Louis at the time. This is before we moved our corporate headquarters here to Scott. This before I even started the company. I'd kind of retired, and I was living in this place that had a bunch of penthouses. It's in downtown Clayton, Missouri. It's like the financial district of St. Louis, if you're familiar with that. And what's the guy? The famous rap guy, Nelly. He like literally lived right above me. So like, here's my penthouse. He's on the top floor. I'm on the floor right below. So like, this guy was there about 6 months out of the year. I think the other 6 months he lived in LA or something like that, but he would always come back in the winter, and he lived there. And so every day, either himself or I think the girl he was dating, Miss Jackson, I don't remember her name, would go down the elevator about 6 a.m. to walk their dog. And that was the time I always walked my dog as well. And like literally almost every day, 7 days a week, we're going down the elevator at the same time. And not once did everybody was like, oh, hey, Nelly, you're so cool. Like, I want your autograph. But never at all. Because if I had done that, what would that have done? Lowered my status in their mind. Just another fan who wants my freaking autograph. I never said, oh, you're nailing anything. We talked about dogs all the time. We talked about football. We talked about cars. I got invited to his events. I never once said, you're so freaking awesome as a rapper, because all that would have done was lower my status. So after probably 3-4 months of just us talking about dogs, cars, because he had this cool Benz, I had this cool Mercedes, we're talking about rims and everything, he started inviting me to stuff, and I still never said, you're so awesome. But because I raised my status in his mind, because we would talk a lot about business, and he would start asking me questions like, what did you do when you were in sales? And, if I started this, like, what do you think would happen there? I started raising my status in his mind because I was more of an expert in those type of things. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean by status frame.
So, I mean, with that, I mean, obviously that goes back to, I think, the statement with your new book, right? Don't act like a seller, start thinking like a buyer. So in that moment, obviously you're disguising yourself as being one of them, right?
Yeah, I'm on the same team. Like, if you want to be a top sales professional, or like if you're the business owner and you want, to, let's say, triple your revenue, triple your profit margins, I'm just throwing out some numbers. You want your salespeople to start viewing selling as being collaborative. It's you working with your prospects to help them find and solve problems to get what they want. Mm-hmm. Average salespeople, most companies are still teaching their salespeople that selling is adversarial. It's like you against the prospect, trying to win them over, manipulate them, pressure them so you can make money. And that's why so much sales resistance is triggered. And then prospects go salespeople because of the way they're coming across to the prospect.
So, I mean, that makes me think about, okay, so you have a psychological background, and that's why you're so proficient in what you do. So if you could define yourself in 3 to 5 words, what would those 3 to 5 words be?
Define myself: problem finder, problem solver, not product pusher.
Okay.
Now, hey, I got to go back to the book, because I know what you're saying. So the book that you quoted is actually a book that's already out by the co-author of my book, Jerry Acuff. It's a really good book. I suggest everybody buy it. And it's titled Stop Acting Like a Seller and Start Thinking Like a Buyer. And Jerry really breaks down the buying process from the prospect's point of view, and how when we start thinking like them, we start to psychologically connect with them much better. Now, Jerry and I have a book that's being published that will be available on Amazon early November. Okay. And here's what it's called. It's called The New Model of Selling to an Unsellable Generation. So anybody wants to order that, look for that in November online on Amazon. If you want it in a bookstore, it'll be available in Barnes & Noble and all the major bookstores and airports early March of 2023. It's just the way the publisher's releasing it at different times. But those would definitely be good books for people, for sure.
So, I mean, speaking about books, I mean, anyone that's watching the video right now, obviously you have a monstrous library behind you. So if you
This is a small part of the library.
So if you were to pick one book that you would like to recommend to our audience, which book would it be?
Man, I think that book that I just talked about with Jerry Acuff would probably be a really good start. I mean, there's some good books. There's some books that are a little bit still old school, but like I can kind of take my background in behavioral science and reword certain things to make them more persuasive in a sense where the prospect pulls in. But, I've read, here's where I got the idea of reading so much. So it wasn't like I was born like, oh, I just love books, right? So I went to my first sales seminar when I got my first sales job by Brian Tracy, a good friend of mine. And this was about 22 years ago. It's probably a couple months after I started. And one of the biggest things that I learned from Brian is he said, use your car as a university on wheels. I was like, that makes complete sense. Like, what am I listening to now? I listen to the radio. Like, those songs are not making me much money, like they sound cool, but they're not really helping me financially. So from that day, quite literally, I started reading 3 books a month. So I made a goal, like I have to typically set aside 45 minutes to an hour every day. I do it 6 days a week. Okay, there's always like Saturday, I usually don't read. I just like kind of veg out, chill out. Okay, I don't think about work or anything. So 6 days a week, about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour a day religiously. I've done that for 22 years. So I read 3 books a month. And then I typically listen to 2 books a month on audio while I'm driving around to work or errands or whatever, because the office is maybe 10 minutes away from my house. So that's 5 books a year, that's 5 books a month. times 12 months a year. That's about 60 books a year for 22 years, religiously. Even when I'm on vacation, I'm still reading. Okay. I'm a freak, but that's about 1,400 books on sales, persuasion, and influence, plus my background in behavioral science. So when people are like, oh my gosh, how do you know all this stuff? Well, I acquired the knowledge. That's all I did. It wasn't like I was born with all that knowledge. So I acquired it. So you want to be great at sales? Well, you start learning how to sell. Like LeBron James wanted to be great at basketball. So we put in way more work than anybody else. It's probably not like, I'm assuming there were probably other high school athletes that had his same bone structure and muscle structure and were extremely talented. But the reason why LeBron is LeBron is because he outlearned all of them. He outlearned all of them as far as like watching film. He outworked all of them by practicing more. Think about Kobe Bryant, right? That's why they're known as the greats, because they do things that others are just not willing to do that might be just as talented as them. They don't go the extra mile. So you want to make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year or more in sales, or if you're the business owner and you want your company to be the number one industry leader in your business, you have to be willing to outlearn your competition because it's all out there.
So with that, it's definitely fascinating. About the education side of it. So I want to talk about time travel in this conversation right now, right?
Time travel.
Yeah, time travel, and I know
All
you're
right.
what the hell? Where's
What
that
is
coming
going
from,
on
right?
over here?
So, being that you are who you are and you have all this information, is there a time that you could think that you can go back to and want to change anything or change one thing? And when would you go back to, and what would you change?
Man, that's an interesting question. I've never been asked that question. I've done like 97 podcasts so far this year. Nobody has asked me an interesting question like that. I like it. I would say if I could go back, some things that I would change is just, really the sales process that we have, which is called NEPQ, neuro emotional persuasion questioning. It really took me, I would say so I was in my sales career about 18 years. I would say it took me a good 11 to 12 years
Hmm.
to really hone that bad boy down where it was like firing all cylinders. Now, if I could have, instead of taking 11 years, squeeze that down to 4 or 5 years, I would have made even a lot more commissions that I did. And the salespeople that I was training, because every company that I sold for, they would work out some type of deal where I would then train all their sales force too. And that's why they blew up. Like this company back here, sold to Blackstone for $2.2 billion. Now, I was not with them at that time, but I definitely helped them get to that level. I wish I would have stayed. I would have made a lot of money, but that's okay. So it's just, I'd say if I could have honed down that and figured out that sales process and fine-tuned it much quicker, would have definitely helped a lot more people.
Hmm.
Because here's the thing, as a sales professional, if, most of the prospects you talk to, let's just be real, have some type of problem. Most of them have multiple problems. But they want to solve the problems, they want to get what they want. But if we don't know how to communicate the right way that triggers them to actually trust us, to want to open up to us, to actually go below the surface, because they're not just going to answer any old, what's your 2 biggest problems that keep you awake at night? Like, people aren't going to answer that. They're not going to go deep with you because they know what you're doing. Okay. But if we're able to learn those type of skills, not only do we make a ton more money for our families, for the charities we love, for the, maybe to donate to the church we go to help our family members who might, need the extra money for medical stuff. Everybody knows what I mean. Sometimes
Yeah.
if you don't have the money, you can't do anything. All right. Not only do we make more money for all that, but more importantly, we help way more of our prospects get out of the status quo. We help them solve their problems and get them the results they want. And if we can't communicate with them properly to help them see that it's far less risky for them
Hmm.
to purchase our product and service to solve their problems and get where they want, compared to doing nothing at all and the problems stay the same, then whose responsibility is that? It's ours.
Hmm.
It's our fault as the salesperson, not the prospect. So once we understand that as professional salespeople and business owners, that it's our responsibility, that our prospects are not buying from us, when we start to get real with ourselves, like, hey, what I'm saying and asking has only gotten my company here, like our salespeople have only gotten us here.
Hmm.
We need to learn more advanced skills so we can help more people get up here. That's when your company really takes off and you're able to bless a lot more people's lives. I really truly know that. So if I could have like shortened that cycle of my learning curve to really get that sales process dialed in, that's what I would have done for sure. If
So,
I could have time traveled.
let's unpeel that a little bit more. So our listener, right? I mean, most
Oh,
people
I
have
like that.
families.
Unpeel that. That's a good
Yep.
one.
And they have kids, right? And so somebody is listening right now, and they have a baby version of Jeremy in their household right now.
Okay.
I want you to define what were you like as a kid? Were you the kid that was always hustling, selling stuff? Were you selling manure from the cows on the farm? Like, what were you like as a child?
I would say, I was a really competitive child, if that makes sense. I never wanted to be second place. Like, and it was instilled in me. And I can't say that it was just me born that way. I think you're influenced as a child, but obviously the people you're around.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're conditioned to believe and act a certain way by maybe your parents, your extended family, maybe coaches, if you played sports, teachers in high school. And, growing up as a kid in elementary school, even in Little League, I played baseball. I played all the way up to college baseball as well. But just growing up, my coaches were extremely competitive. Okay. I played football in high school and baseball, a little bit of basketball too. I went to a smaller school. And it seemed like almost every coach I had was extremely competitive. Okay. Just work, 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 develop skills, develop skills, develop skills. Now, most of my teammates weren't willing to put in that time. They were still good, but I was probably just like they were, but I was willing to go the extra mile. So I learned very young that, hey, if I come to baseball practice an hour early and I stay 45 minutes later, that means I'm practicing more than twice of any of my teammates.
Mm-hmm.
That means if I learn the right techniques when I'm hitting the right stances, if I understand how to read the ball, because I played center field. So if I understand how to read the ball from the pitcher's hand movement, where it's going on the plate, where their bat speed is going, I can already get a 1 to 2 foot jump on the ball if it's hit this direction. Then I outlearned my competitors. That's why I made All-State in baseball. That's why I played college baseball. It wasn't because I was like some gifted freak born out of my mother's womb. It's just because I put in the extra time. I'm not saying that I'm Kobe Bryant or anything, but I put in the extra time. And I realized from a very early age that if I put in the extra time, if I developed more skills, if I watched the way I was batting on tape, because in those days you had to put in tapes and stuff. This was like the late 90s, that I was going to be better than anybody else in who I was competing with. So when I got into college and I started to get into sales, like my major is behavioral science and human psychology, I just took that same competitiveness, and it really hurt me the first couple months because there was probably 300, 400 salespeople in that company, and I was dead last the first couple months. Like that was not something I was accustomed to, but it was all because I just I didn't have the right skills. And once I started to develop those skills, I would spend extra time every day to develop them. I would get up an hour early. I would stay up till 1 a.m. Like Saturdays, 7 hours. That's all I did was learn. Because it's like, if I outlearn everybody else, I'll just outsell everybody else. And sure enough, within that first year, number one salesperson in the company. Second year, number one salesperson in the entire industry. And it just kept going because I'm just a person that is ever learning. Like right now, our clients were like, wow, this, NEPQ is so amazing. This is so great. And I'm like, oh, no. Like it's still evolving. Like it's not going to be the same here a year later. Like we're always improving. We're always adding more training in our virtual training centers. We're always making NEPQ better for our clients. We will never, ever stop learning and making our clients get more results. So that's just something I took from an early age, from coaches I was around. I grew up on a cattle ranch, so I'd have to get up at 4 a.m. to freaking, go do stuff with the cows. We also had, for a while, we had like a dairy farm on that. So I had to get up at 4 and milk the cows. So that kind of stuff taught me early on that I needed to work harder than other people. But then I also learned I have to develop more skills than other people too. That's why, it's kind of an interesting subject. So when I always get annoyed by people that say like, oh, I don't get paid enough. I'm in this profession. They don't pay me enough. I'm like, stop crying. You're not going to get paid that much in that profession because anybody can do that. Like if you work at Wendy's as a cashier, I love you to death, but those are not meant to be careers when you're in your 30s or 40s. Those are starter jobs for kids, for teenagers. If that's all you can do, your skill level, because you don't learn additional skills, anybody can do that job. So they're not going to pay you that much for a job that anybody off the street can do. I always tell my kids, look, if you guys want to get paid a ton of money, you need to develop skills that most people in the world do not have. Mm-hmm. So that's why when people complain about like, oh, LeBron James makes 50 million a year, that's not fair. I'm like, hell, yeah, it is fair. He has skills that nobody else has. That's why he gets paid more than anybody else. And that is the way it should be. If you're a salesperson and you outsell everybody else 10-1, should you get paid more than everybody else? Hell yeah, you should, right? If you're a freaking neurosurgeon and you're the #1 neurosurgeon in the world, should you get paid more because you save more lives? Hell yeah, you should, because you developed more skills. So I'm a big person on like, look, you want to get paid a lot of money, you just learn skills that most people don't have, and you're always going to have options. You know, if your company goes bankrupt, you think it's going to be a problem getting on with somebody else? No, you're going to have 50 other companies that want you and are going to pay you more. So you develop the right skills in anything, especially sales, you can pretty much do anything you want in your life and go anywhere you want, because you're always going to be in demand, if that makes sense.
I mean, it makes perfect sense, and I'm just listening to you. I mean, it's like the force of the Jedi is very strong when you start communicating and you start talking, right? So I want to kind of talk about like, are you getting this hustle mentality from like an ancestor, like your dad or your mom? Obviously, they were on a farm, but genetically, where is this thing coming from? Because I don't think it just.
I really don't know, because my biological dad, him and my mom got divorced when I was like 1, so I never knew him till I was 18. And he's a great guy, but he's definitely not competitive like me. He's just kind of like, hey, whatever, really good guy. I mean, he's got some qualities that I don't have. My stepdad, he's just kind of hey, I'm going to get a job and this is just what I'm going to do. And I'm, after my job, I'm just going to go home and relax, not really competitive. So I'm not really, a lot of people have asked me that, because my brothers are not like me at all. They're far more passive, and I'm not like an aggressive person, if that makes sense. I'm more of a person that likes to set back. I'm not extroverted and I'm not introverted. I'm in the middle. It's some ambivert or some other version. I can quite literally go into a crowd. I just did a keynote for a very large insurance company in Denver on Friday. There was almost 6,000 people in that theater. I can go do that and talk with 6,000 people on a dime. And then I can also go sit at like a birthday party and not even talk to anybody. I can kind of go both ways. I don't know. I'm kind of weird there. So to me, I don't know where it came from, the competitiveness, but the skill level, I can assure you, was not born with advanced skills like that. I just acquired the skill level.
So I mean, this spin off of that, right? So I mean, how do you take that, what you've learned and grew up to become? How do you then deal with that with your family life and with your kids and your wife right now?
Well, as far as with my kids, I try to, I just instill correct principles and, kind of let them govern themselves. I mean, you can't force somebody to do that. Now, will my kids eventually, get into sales, get into business? I don't know. We'll see. My oldest daughter, she's 21. She goes to school here at Arizona State. She's an English major. So she's going to graduate with her bachelor's, and she's going to get her master's and her PhD. She wants to teach college English. She's also a really good communicator, because she's seen her dad like that for a number of years. So she would probably be really good at public speaking. Now, she might do that. I don't know. One of my other daughters, my second daughter, Quincy, 19, she actually works for the company. She's on our social media team. So when my kids, if they ever come to work in the company, they're not going to start here at the top. They're going to start at the very bottom. So she just got hired on as somebody that's in our social media team that DMs clients in all of our social media channels. And that is the very lowest on the totem pole where somebody starts. Okay. My other 2 kids are still in school and high school, and we'll see what they want to do. And then I have a 4-year-old. Okay. So she's 4. So no, we don't know what she's going to do, but I just teach them. Like I said, look, you guys want to make a lot of money. I don't want to hear any complaining that you get into some job that doesn't pay enough, because whose choice is that if you took that job? That is your choice. Nobody forced you to go into a job that's not going to pay you much because everybody can do it. You want to make a lot of money, you need to learn skills. We're not talking about underwater basket weaving, but you learn skills that most people do not have, and you will always get paid more than anybody else.
Huh. I mean, that's a hell of a statement to make, right? So, like, let's just talk about like a VP, right? A VP of sales is coming to you, and I would think that that's probably one of your avatars, right? And he's saying,
Sure.
"I'm having issue with sales," and he's telling you that the issue with sales right now is that his team is not converting, his team is not they're not motivated to make more numbers. What words of wisdom would you give to that individual VP to help them
Well,
continue?
our team, if they were talking to like a VP on like a Zoom or in person or wherever, that would probably, instead of just like, let's say they're like, oh, we got this problem, this problem. Most salespeople would then jump in with like, oh, this is what they need, so I'm going to tell them how we can solve that. But we wouldn't do that. Okay, we would say, whoa, 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 whoa. You're on page 15. I'm still back here on page 1.
Mhm.
Walk me through. If I'm a salesperson, let's start here. If I'm a salesperson and I came to work for your company today, what would my sales training actually look like?
Mhm.
See, we have to diagnose. We have to find out. We're not going to sell to what they think they need in the beginning, because most prospects don't know what they need
Mhm.
when they first start talking to them, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you have let's say you have a really bad headache. You wake up, you're like, oh my gosh, my head hurts so bad. Like I've got a migraine. I think I need to go to urgent care and get some medication for the migraine. That might cost me $100 with my copay, because that's what you think you need. You don't know yet. You go talk to the doctor, and the doctor starts asking you questions about how long it's been going on, what the pain feels like, what is it causing, kind of goes a little deeper. His or her questioning triggers you to
Mhm.
think, maybe I have a bigger problem than I thought I had. He then or she suggests you need to do a CAT scan on your brain. You do a CAT scan. It comes back that you have a terminal tumor
Mhm.
and you've got a month to live. Okay. Well, you thought you needed some medication for a migraine when you first walked in, but their questioning ability and the diagnosis cause you to then see how big of a problem you really have now, right? So the hell with the $100 copay budget. Now it's going to be a $2 million surgery. Your insurance only covers 80%. So you need 400 grand. Well, that just changed things, right? So you're going to go do whatever you can to go get that money. Otherwise you're going to die. So that's why you can never just sell to the needs of a prospect, because most don't know what they need in the beginning. You have to sell to the real problems you help them find that they didn't know they had.
Mhm.
So that would be the same case if we're talking to a company. They might feel that this is their problem, but if we just accept that on face value, we're not doing them a service, because we don't know what the root cause of that problem is. We don't know how that problem's affecting them. We have to find that out. Okay. So that's why you can never, ever sell to the needs of what the prospect thinks they need in the very beginning, because you will never be able to solve their real problems if you do that.
Okay. So on that note, somebody's listening. They're like, okay, how do they get in contact with you? Where do they find you?
Yeah, sure. So if they want to start, because we didn't have time to really go in through like, neuro emotional persuasion questions and what questions you ask in different sales situations in any industry. We didn't have time obviously today. So best place to kind of look at us if they want to get some like nibbles of what we do, or little hors d'oeuvres, before they get into like maybe our, what our clients are in, as far as that training. But if they want some resources, some free resources, just have them go to our Facebook group. I think we gave you the link. It's www.salesrevolution.pro. So have them go to salesrevolution.pro. And right when they join, just check your Facebook Messenger, everybody. Right when you join, somebody in my team, let's say, hey, I'm a Jeremy Miner's 7-level team, will DM you over a resource called the NEPQ 101 mini course. And it's our CEO that just breaks down the different stages of neuro emotional persuasion questions. And we'll give you some different questions right there on that document. Those questions alone will probably help you sell more than what you're doing now. And then we go live in that Facebook group. I think we have about 30,000 people in that group since we started about a year ago. But we go live in that Facebook group about 3 to 4 times a week, different trainings, different Q&As. And then if they're a company or an individual salesperson and they're like, hey, I like the nibbles. Those are really good, but I want to learn everything so I could triple my income or I can triple our revenue. Then they can just simply, message us in the DMs or in the Facebook group, and then somebody can reach out and go through options with it if they want that for sure. So I'd have them join the Facebook group.
Cool, cool, very cool. I mean, just listening to you speak, I want to ask you this particular question before we get ready to
Yeah.
close out. If you could spend 24 hours with anyone and that person could be dead or alive, and you spend 24 hours with them uninterrupted, who would it be and why?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot of people I'd probably want to spend with. I would say Tony Robbins.
Hmm.
And that might be a different answer than what you're used to, but Tony is really exceptional at getting his audience, because he's not selling one-to-one, he's selling one-to-many, getting his audience to like an emotional state when there's 10,000 people in an arena. Okay. And there's certain things he says and he asks when he's not just on stage, but out in the crowd,
Mhm.
that I've learned as well. Cause I like to watch all the stuff. I'm like, oh, the reason why he tapped that lady on the shoulder there is because this person asked him this question and he was doing that to show empathy. So there's little things like that. So if I could sit with Tony and just talk about human psychology for 24 hours, I think I'd be in heaven for sure.
Yeah, I think most people don't realize like Tony specializes in more psychology than anything else, and he
Oh,
executes
100%.
well,
And
100%.
that the best psychologists in the world do, right? The best psychologists don't sit there and just sit there and listen to your drama.
Mm.
They ask you certain questions that allow you to understand that you have full control to change your situation yourself. And that's why they get paid so much. That's exactly what Tony does in a big overview for sure.
Definitely, definitely. So going into closing, man, I mean, you're a fellow podcaster. You have a podcast show. So I like to close out my show by giving whoever I'm interviewing an opportunity to become the host of my show. So Uncaged is your show. Do you have any questions that you would like to ask me?
Well, hey, I appreciate being on your show. I listened to a couple episodes this morning. I was really impressed with kind of some of the people that you were interviewing and stuff. I can't remember their exact names. I've got it here on my laptop. But let me ask you this: why did you start your podcast? And because you could do a lot of things in your life. Why did you start a podcast and just give your time for all these other people?
Well, for me, I almost died. So, I mean, on my deathbed, literally, I had a stroke. And when I woke up from it, it was just kind of like, what are my next steps going to be? And fortunately for me, my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now, was telling me it's time for me to rebrand myself. And she said, I've been branding everyone for so long. So I was like, all right, cool. Let me think about it. Am I going to be a YouTuber or am I going to be a podcaster? Let me step out of my shell from being the guy behind the curtain. And I
Right.
became a podcaster. And year one was just me figuring out the systems. And then now, if you fast forward, I look at it more so as me leaving behind a legacy, not just for my kids, but for entrepreneurs. And again, your
Yeah.
story is now part of that, and you could leave this
Yeah.
story behind for your kids as well.
Hey, I like that. You're giving the knowledge to people from other people in all walks of life that have acquired different types of knowledge, and you're giving that to these people freely. So I commend you for taking your time to do that. That's impressive.
Yeah, well, I definitely appreciate it, man. I definitely appreciate you taking time out your busy schedule today. I think once your book goes live, I mean, we also have a book club as well too. So I would love to interview you in that book club
Sure.
about your new book release as
Yeah,
well.
let's do it. It's supposed to drop because they're waiting on the online version. It's supposed to drop on Amazon sometime in November. I don't have the exact dates. I think it's like the 16th or something. It won't be available in bookstores like Barnes and Noble and the airports until early March 2023. That's our Morgan James is our publisher, Morgan James Publishing. It's just that's how they break up the when they release it.
Cool, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely appreciate you, man. I think you dropped so many like nuggets and nuances, details, and value today that anyone that's in sales, if they don't realize that sales is really psych 101, then they probably need to go back and get into psych class.
That's right. We're going to teach them psych like 501. I love it. All right, man. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
The pleasure's mine, man. That's